wanted to give you a little heads up on what we're going to be doing in the Intro to Wind class this week so that we can use the class time to do some research. Last time I wanted you to get some information on other forms of renewable energy and some of the pros and cons. And I've kind of summarized some of the findings here. Of course, hydroelectric power is using water in some way to generate electricity. Usually they create a dam or they back the water up, which creates, well, if you want to think of it in terms of electricity, a difference in potential. You have all this water stored behind a big wall, and that represents a big potential of energy. And then the water is released through tubes in some way that allows the water to force turbines to spin around. And those spinning turbines create a relative motion between a magnetic field and a conductor, and that's what generates the electricity. It's probably about as clean as it can get. It doesn't pollute the air in any way. And a lot of times one of the side effects is it makes a nice lake or a recreation area and allows for flood control. You can control how much water is released. And of course, it's available in the U.S., so it's a domestic source. On the negative side, they can, well, the environmentalists get upset. It can mess up fish migration patterns, and when you first build a dam, all the people that happen to live where you're going to make your reservoir are going to have a little bit of a problem because their land is now going to be underwater. So there's a certain amount of impact to people that live around there. And of course, you have to be someplace where water is readily available, and the number of places that are suitable for this are pretty limited. So there's certain parts of the country that are conducive to that, and for most of us it's not so much. Solar power. This is another great idea that's gradually being developed into something that has great potential. Again, creates no pollution. It's clean, and it's virtually, as far as we're concerned, inexhaustible as long as there's sunshine. Of course, if there's no sunshine, then we have bigger problems. We wouldn't be so worried about making electricity. We'd be worried about survival. But, no moving parts. It's for the most part, it's maintenance free. There is some setup and maintenance that's going to be required, but then on the downside, well, you have to have sunlight, so it's not suitable for every place. It only works when the sun is shining, so it's intermittent. It's only good for well, during the day and when the sun is bright enough to create energy. And then there's some concern about, there's always environmentalists, there's people that no matter how clean an energy source is, there's somebody that's going to object to it. And there are environmentalists that believe when you cover big chunks of land with solar collectors, you cause some problems. And to address that, or to at least talk about that a little bit, I found this graphic, and we're not testifying before Congress or anything here, so I assume that it's, I got it from a reputable source, so I assume that it's correct. But based on current projections, in order to provide enough energy to power, virtually everything in the world, and this is a projection for 20 years from now. In order to do that, these green areas here would be the surface area that's. So if you look at it in that context, and of course these areas wouldn't be concentrated, they would be probably spread out even further. The amount of energy, and that's assuming you have to power everything with solar power. To even get to like 10% or 20%, it would be substantially less than that. So the amount of surface area required is not that great. And then wind, we'll talk a little bit in class about, and we already have talked about some of the pros and cons of wind. Some of the things that we already talked about with capacity and availability. Wind would be intermittent as well because it's only available when the wind is blowing, and only when the wind is blowing above a certain speed. So in that sense, it has faults as well. And then there are environmental concerns. People concerned with birds, bats, and just the impact on human beings. I'm sure you guys found in your research that there are a lot of people that are convinced that there are health risks involved with having wind turbines near human beings. So this is a news story that I just some version of it was picked up by a lot of papers, and I saw it all over the internet. It was in the Omaha paper too yesterday, and last year was a big year for wind power capacity. It went up 39% from the previous year, which is good news. The bad news is that the number of jobs associated with it didn't go up by that much, and that's pretty common across everything in the economy right now. Companies are very hesitant to hire because they're uncertain about the future, and they don't want to take on any extra costs. And unfortunately, that's what hiring people represents to companies. Let's see, total. See, number of new turbines, 9,900 megawatts, which would be 9.9 gigawatts, was installed last year, which is up from the 8.4 gigawatts or 8.4 billion watts that was put in 2008. So we're up to 35,000 million or 35 billion or 35 gigawatts, which generally when they give these numbers, they give it in terms of how many homes it can power. 9.7 homes, which is substantial. Somewhere in there it says that it's still, the amount of electricity generated by wind still only represents about 1%. I've seen 2% in other articles. Yeah, down here, wind power generated only about 1% of power for the entire country last year. So whether it's 1% or 2%, it still has a lot of room to grow. And this is interesting. In Texas, it accounted for 6%. And I'm not too sure. Let's see in class this week, see if we can figure out what the percentage in Iowa is, because I know Iowa actually per capita generates more electricity from wind than any other state. At least that's what they said recently. Another interesting thing in this article I'll call your attention to is this little note over here. We are in a foot race with the Chinese, who are providing more and more incentives and mandates for the industry. You'll see this tactic used a lot. This isn't really a political science class, but it's pretty common for interest groups to use, I guess the term is xenophobia, the fear of outsiders. The idea that the Chinese are going to get ahead of us in this is, that can be very motivational to politicians. So, uh, so that's kind of interesting. And China has implemented a renewable energy standard. In other words, they have set national targets, which means that they have made a political decision that a certain amount of the energy they generate has to come from renewable sources. And I think here in the U.S. that's been sort of put on the back burner as all the other uh, political issues. I think the economy or jobs has taken front and center, and coming up with renewable energy standards has slipped off into the background a little bit. But hopefully that'll come back, not just for the sake of you guys out there looking for careers in this area, but for the future of our energy production. So that's interesting. I wanted to call your attention to that news story. And how much does wind energy cost? This is kind of a useful. If you go to the American Wind Energy Association, they have a pretty good breakdown of how much it costs. One of the objections you often hear raised is that wind energy is very expensive, and the only reason that it's caught on is because the government subsidizes it. Well, and keeping in mind that the objective of the AWEA is to promote wind energy, right? So it's always good to know what stake the author of any website has in the information. And of course, it's in their interest to put a positive spin on wind energy. So that's just something to keep in mind. You want to be aware where this information is coming from. So this is interesting. I'll let you read it for yourself. But there is a certain amount of government money that goes into subsidizing and promoting wind energy. It's probably not as much as most people think it is, but it is. It can make a difference. So that's an interesting link. I have another one here, and this website I found a while back. It's called ZFAX, and this is they try very hard, and it's real hard, but they try very hard to be objective. That is, they try to present both sides of an issue, and not, so often you go into these different places and you read information, and they have an agenda. They want to promote a certain way of thinking or a certain political idea, and so everything in the article is geared at that. This article, they go through great pains to be objective, and I thought it was pretty interesting. I'm not sure if this is let's see, I think I got this last semester, so some of the information might be a little bit dated, but this might be one of the most interesting little tables here. The total cost per kilowatt hour, and that's how we measure energy use for a gas turbine, which would be natural gas fired, is almost 14 cents a kilowatt hour. For coal, it's 4.5 cents. Nuclear is just a touch more than coal, and wind is 7.5 cents. So maybe in class we can figure out if you use if you have an average energy use in your home, what would be the difference in cost between coal power? If you're, of course, this is cost to produce. The cost that they charge the consumer is going to be more than that, but you can look at the difference. you're basically looking at a 3 cent per kilowatt hour difference. So we can actually look at that and see, well, you know, how much difference would that make to an average homeowner? So that's a good resource I encourage you to check out. And this website, windaction.org, remember the ORG tells you that it's a nonprofit, but they are against what they call industrial wind. So let's see if we can, and I don't think this will play over the recorder that I'm using. This is a video about green jobs, and it really just kind of poo-poos the idea that there are any substantial jobs coming from wind energy. And we'll play that in class. It's just it's less than a minute long, but I don't believe it'll come through on this one. Here's another one here about a turbine that's on fire. And again, that's pretty short. It's less than a minute long. I'll play it in class. And I believe it's in Canada. And this organization is, let's see, they were formed to counteract the misleading information promulgated by the wind energy industry and various environmental groups. Support for this effort comes from a large and diversified group of environmentalists, energy experts, and ordinary citizens. See, they're pretty vague on that. A large and diverse group, okay, environmentalists, okay, probably the people that object to it based on harm to animals. Energy experts, now that could be people from the coal industry, it could be people from, you know, the natural gas industry, from the electric utilities. So, you know, we might want to do more research into that before we, and then ordinary citizens, well, that could be virtually anybody. If you happen to work for somebody that doesn't like wind energy because it damages their business in some way, you could join and call yourself an ordinary citizen. So this if you want to go someplace and really get the dark side of wind, there are some great resources here, and we'll explore this a little bit in class to kind of get a feel for it. And this is worldwide, so there's a lot of stories from well, there's Canada, UK, Maine. Here's a guy that writes a gripping image of what his life is like living next to an industrial wind facility. Even the way they characterize it makes it sound a little bit evil. An industrial wind facility. Doesn't sound, you know, a wind farm sounds a little more pleasant, but so that's kind of interesting. So yeah, the jobs and safety thing is that little video that we'll watch says really that, you know, the jobs are not there, and then the safety is the one of the turbine on fire. It doesn't really explain why it's on fire or what happened there, but here's some more political articles, and we can take a look at these in class as well. But North Carolina wants to ban turbines completely, and then there's a kind of a political battle between the East Coast and the Midwest about jobs. The Midwest is where all the wind is, and there's parts of the Midwest that are in pretty good shape as far as jobs go. We don't really, in the opinion of those that say if you're from someplace like I don't know, parts of the East Coast where the recession has hit a lot harder, you might have a different take on it. And of course there's the China stories. Whoops, I'll have to do this from school because it's I got it through the library server and not able to get it. And Nebraska is working on developing some kind of a renewable energy standard that will promote wind energy in Nebraska. So here's the assignment that I want to spend time looking at tomorrow. Uh, we're going to, I'm going to have you take a look at, at least 5, 10 is plenty, but no more than 10 different companies that are involved in wind energy, whether it's the manufacture of turbines, the installation, the construction phase, the operation and maintenance, and then figure out what part the company plays in the grand scheme of wind farming, energy development, and figure out what the company's vision or what their plan for the future is as far as from the perspective of wind energy. And then find at least 2 or 3 open positions for each of those companies. So, no, let's say find at least 2 or 3 open positions from among the companies. So you only have to find 2 or 3 total that look like something you might be interested in. And summarize those. And then the product that I'll want from you in the end will be an email with information about the company. You can attach a Word file to an email, and if you would prefer to do it on paper, that would be fine. You're really going to have to use the internet though to get the information. Okay, if you have any questions, bring them to class and we'll discuss it then. But I want you to start going out, finding companies that look like something you might want to, or someplace you might actually want to work in, and start to kind of see yourself doing that.